This brings me on nicely to your latest project, because one of my other favourite birds as a child, and a bird I never got a chance to see as a young birder in the UK, was the osprey, which when I was growing up was considered a pretty scarce bird in the UK. You'd have to drive up to Lochgarten in Scotland to stand a decent chance of seeing one in the mid-90s. Because whilst you've been the human swan, next year you're planning to become the human osprey, because your next journey is following the osprey migration path from Scotland all the way down to the west coast of Africa. So my first question for you is, why were ospreys the next target bird?
Okay, so firstly, I suppose there was do we do more expeditions like the previous one? And I basically, at a UN conference in Durban, I had enough people go, we need more of what you do for engaging people in the wetland, in not only the wetland issue but also migration and continuing the flyway. So I was already looking at the rest of the flyway down into Africa, and I happened to be, obviously a big thing that drives me is really inspiring characters in the world of conservation. And Roy Dennis was definitely one of those, who's been behind the osprey comeback in Scotland and in the rest of the UK and in many other countries in Europe. And there was a moment where I found he was kind of throwing me around the dance floor at a ceilidh in Scotland at the Scottish Ornithological Conference, and happened to say, please do the same thing for the osprey, and connecting all those communities. And so that was, I suppose, the start of the idea. And then, the other work of Tim McCrill and others. And then I looked at it all and thought it's a perfect bird for this kind of thing. It's starting to make a comeback along this flyway. And it's big enough that people can recognize it. Non-expert birders can recognize it. There's enough of them now, they have a chance to see them. There's lots of groups putting in a lot of effort, but there's also still really big gaps in what we know when we talk about the different challenges along the flyway. We speak about them in quite generic terms, and also there's a lot of other birds using this flyway that are threatened, and huge gaps in the international data sets for that area. So I just thought there was so many things we could do with it, so many other species that could benefit, and the osprey is fantastic.
It is indeed one of my favourite birds.
The other benefit is that where it sits on an ecological level, in that it needs to feed, but in salt water and in fresh water, it also relies on healthy forests and kind of tall trees, and doing these big migrations. It's a really good indicator for the general health and state of the habitats along the flyway.